one day he started getting, threats and having to pay for security. Like, it's funny because when they opened their practice, they only had $8,000. And so they got very creative. So I opened a third business.
And now give me one or two mistakes that any newcomer should avoid if they want to become entrepreneurs in Canada.
Yes. So one mistake that newcomers could avoid if you're starting a business in Canada is
Welcome back to the Canadian Dream Podcast. Today we're going to talk about one of my favorite topics, business. We have here on the other side of the screen someone who was born in Mexico, lives in Ottawa. She has been in Ottawa for more than 2 decades, and she has a lot of experience in business and in business consultancy. I have the pleasure to introduce you to Karla Briones. Thank you so much for being here, Karla. Karla, before we start our conversation here today about businesses and entrepreneurship, etc., tell me a little bit about where you were born and your childhood, your life before you came to Canada.
Yeah, so I was born in Mexico, so in a state of Jalisco, where the tequila comes from, actually. And when I was 2 years old, I ended up moving, my parents ended up moving to the north of Mexico in a state called Chihuahua. And yes, that's where the little dog comes from. So I grew up there until I was 18 years old in the late 90s. And unfortunately, in the late 90s, that's when it started getting really unsafe in the north of Mexico. And all of those Netflix series that you see about the cartels, that was actually my reality. That was the Mecca where all of that, because I was in a border town, bordering with Texas. And that was exactly where all of that was happening when I was in high school when I was 18 years old. My parents were entrepreneurs. My dad had a veterinary clinic, so he's a veterinary doctor. And one day he started getting, threats and having to pay for security. Like, things started to go really, really, really not safe. And there was a mass exodus from people living in that town. And we were just desperate to trying to go to a place that was safe, an environment that would allow us and myself and my brothers to have a better future. And that's when my parents made the decision to sell everything they had and literally to pack everything and come to Canada. And we ended up applying actually for a permanent residency, which back in the day would only take 10 months, 12 months, which is not that right now. So we applied, and then after 11 months, I think it was, we got our permanent residency, and we had 6 months to literally pack up and go. And we actually ended up packing as much as we could in a U-Haul and drove from the border town of Chihuahua, or the border state of Chihuahua, all the way to Ottawa in 1997. So,
wow.
Yeah, we definitely, it was not a decision that I made. It was a decision that my parents made for, the betterment of the family. And I'm pretty grateful that they did.
Yeah. So was your dad an entrepreneur as well?
Yeah. So he is, he's not retired. So but all his life, he had a veterinary practice or a veterinary hospital in Mexico. And when we came here, obviously, foreign trained healthcare professional wasn't able to practice. He started selling gas contracts from door to door. That was his first job. And many, many, many years later, and I'm, bypassing a lot of stories that probably a lot of people know what they are, but many years later, he recertified as a veterinary doctor and opened his practice here in the Ottawa area.
Oh, so he did manage to work in the field.
He makes a terrible employee. I think a lot of entrepreneurs, we make terrible employees.
Yeah.
He's like, nope, I wanna continue my dream of continuing being an entrepreneur, and he did.
I was actually hearing, I was listening to a podcast a few days ago, and someone said that entrepreneurs are people who are highly disagreeable. Do you agree?
I agree. No, I don't agree. No, yes, we are.
It totally resonated to me. I thought, oh, wow. Yeah, even when I was working as an employee, I could never agree. And that's why I'm so comfortable being my own boss. But we try to be good. We try to be good bosses, right?
Good bosses, exactly. Trying to be everything that our bosses were not
Yeah.
and trying
So
to do it better.
I want to know a few more things about the way you are brought up and lessons you learned from your parents. But before that, can you introduce yourself just so that our audience understands who you are, why we're having this conversation today? You have a website, you have a few businesses. So go ahead. The floor is yours.
Yeah. So again, my name is Karla Briones, and I like to describe myself as a serial entrepreneur. I have very varied businesses. 15 years ago, I opened Global Pet Foods, which is a natural health food store for pets in the Ottawa area. And then a year later, I opened a second one. Then I opened a restaurant. Then I'm now into business consulting and dabbing into the non-for-profit sector as well. So I love I guess at the core of my being, I'm a problem solver. So I see problems and I try to find solutions and make a business out of that.
I love that. It's the core of being a business owner, isn't it?
Yes, it is. Really, it's finding your day to day mundane problems and figuring out how to solve them or how to do it better.
And there's another thing too. One of those insights, I listen to lots of podcasts. Okay, so another insight is that you know, doers don't really criticize because they're busy doing, and they are busy solving problems. But those who are not doing, they are so busy looking at what has been done and criticizing that.
I agree 100%.
Yeah.
And you see it in social media too, right? Like, I mean, social media is awesome, but I don't have a lot of time for social media because I'm constantly doing something, creating, percolating. But yeah, there could be a lot of drama in social media from people that are always criticizing. But I wholeheartedly agree with that statement.
Of course. So before we continue talking about your different businesses, let's go back a little bit. What is the main lesson that you think you learned from your dad being an entrepreneur and giving you that hands-on experience, being so close to him and seeing how he was managing his business?
Don't take no for an answer. I think that was the main lesson I've learned from both my parents. My mom was they were the team, right? My dad was a veterinarian. My mom was always a practice manager. So don't take no for an answer. And it's funny because when they opened their practice, they only had $8,000 to open a veterinary practice. By the way, you need about $1 million, and they only had 8,000, and nobody would lend them money because they were, immigrants, and so they got very creative. Hearing the no's from the banks, hearing the no's from all of the sources out there, just added fuel to the fire of being more in tune with what they wanted to do, and they got very creative on ways to finding those fundings or those resources to open that hospital with the limited amount of resources, financial resources. So never take no for an answer and always try to look for a different way.
And can you give me one or two examples of your present life when you were close to taking no for an answer, and then you went, no, I will keep pushing. I'll keep pushing.
Mm-hmm. So right now, actually, well, not right now, 6 years ago, when I wanted to start my business consulting for immigrant entrepreneurs to help immigrants open their businesses, I was having a hard time because I was trying to reach a demographic that a lot of the times they're coming with limited resources, and they may not necessarily be able to afford the services that I was providing at the time. And I kept hearing lots of, thank you, but not thank you. Thank you, but not thank you. And then I started seeing how there were some programs that were popping up that were targeted at the same demographic. But they were free for that demographic. So, I kept saying the no, thank you, but not thank you. It's too, it's out of my budget, so on and so forth. So it's like, how can I compete with free? I can't. But what if I become part of the free? So instead of actively going after the end user, I actually decided to go and offer my services to the organizations that were getting the funding. And that proved to be a really good, a really good way of going around the no's, the thank yous, but not thank yous, to become part of something bigger, something that's already funded, where they have the resources, but not necessarily the know-how on how to help that client. And that's how I started. That's how I started that business, and that's how I'm growing that business currently.
Nice. Eh, Having said that, how important is it in your life to actually have someone that can support you, that can back you up when the world seems to be saying, no, that's not going to work? Do you have anybody like this in your life?
Myself, you mean like a business advisor, business coach?
Someone who supports, in my life, it's my wife. She
Oh,
supports
okay.
me like fully. And many times when I feel that I cannot share an idea or a project with anybody else, she's the one that will understand that I can't see what you can see. I can't fully understand what you're thinking, but I know you will make it work. Do you have anybody like that in your life?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. So I'm very fortunate to have a pretty good network of champions and supporters. Obviously, number one would be my husband, my poor husband. Oh my God. Whenever he gets the elbow in the middle of the night of like, Sean, I just thought of something. And he's like, oh God, no,
You do
what?
that
But
too?
oh yes, absolutely. It's like, oh, I got it. Like springing at 2 a.m. in the bed. It's like, I got it. And so my husband is extremely supportive. He's my sober second thought. I'm very explosive, very I'm like the big idea person. And then he comes in and he's like, okay, well, have you thought about this, about that, and about this? So he's sort of like the sober second thought that I need in my life. So definitely my husband, my parents are great supporters. Actually, I started the first business because of my parents. I told them one day, all I ever want to do is to open a pet store. And their answer to me when I thought that they were going to be like, we moved all the way from Mexico to here for you to open up a pet store. Their answer was, so why don't you? And it was like, yeah, why don't I? Right. So after everything they've gone through, what's limiting me to go after what I want to do?
Yeah.
So I'm very fortunate to have a big support system in Sean, my husband, and then mom and dad as well.
Great. My mom, she always, always, always encouraged me to do anything I wanted. And that's what she always said. You can do anything you want. As long as you really want it and work hard for it, you can do whatever. And I was, it sounds so easy. Right?
Yes.
We know it's not, but I think having that encouragement in our family is crucial. You mentioned, do you have another support group? Do you know a lot of other entrepreneurs, people in the same situation as you?
Yeah, so I've been part of a few. So when I was starting my business, and I was also a new mom when I started the first business. So there were a lot of new things, like
Of
big
course,
life
you were
changing
a new
things,
mom,
right?
and
Yeah, exactly. So I spent, I think, my first 5 years in business really putting my head down and trying to be a good mom and a good business partner, a good wife, a good daughter, that I kind of isolated myself socially from the rest of the world. And there was a point in my life when I realized that I needed to network with like-minded individuals, not to gain more business. I wasn't interested in like new business development. I was more interested in networking with like-minded individuals so that I could learn from them, so that we could share best practices, so then I started looking for mastermind groups. Is there anything, that I could join that I'm able to connect with other local entrepreneurs so that we can push each other harder, give each other idea, be the sounding board. And I ended up finding an organization called EO, which is an international organization. It's EO, or it stands for Entrepreneurs Organization. And there's chapters all over the world. So I was there for a few years. It was very enriching. It was the first time that I realized that I was not the only crazy person with all of these big ideas. I was, sitting next to extremely successful people locally, and then having events internationally and meeting, so it's a great international network of entrepreneurs. And then eventually I ended up joining another masterminds group that's called TEC. So the executive committee. It's the same idea, putting together CEOs or entrepreneurs, business owners of different companies. And the idea is to help each other out and to push each other and to figure out, be each other's accountability partners. So it's a really cool network where you find people that are as crazy as you are, but also they know you better than, a lot of the times some family members, just because you spend a lot of time with them. So yeah, I there was a point where I needed to look for that type of community.
And were you living in Ottawa back then?
Yes.
Yeah, that's where you're based now, right? You live in Ottawa.
Yes.
Have you always lived in Ottawa since you came to Canada?
No, no, no. So we arrived in to Canada in 97, and we landed in Ottawa because that's where the program that I wanted to go to university was. And then after I finished my program, I studied journalism, of all things. After I finished there you go. After I finished journalism, I took a postgraduate degree in public relations in Toronto. And somewhere in between, I actually went to Spain. I did a year abroad in Spain. So I kind of been all over the place, lived in Toronto for like 5 years after graduating from my program, and worked in public relations. And then that one day I got a dog, and I fell in love with my dog, and I became a crazy dog parent. And that's when the idea of I want to own a pet store, right? Like I want to have a pet store where all the products are with natural ingredients made in Canada, solving that problem. And then that's when I asked that question to my parents, and then they said, so why don't you? So we came back to Ottawa and opened it in Ottawa.
Mm-hmm. Well, when you say we did it, who was helping you out? Your parents or your husband?
My husband. So we were married, and then so I always, we're the team, my husband and I, right? Yeah. So I'm usually the front, the face of the business, and he's diligently working in the background, helping with some of the accounting stuff or some paperwork. So we is my husband and I.
Yeah. Well, this conversation could go into so many different directions. I'm trying to pick, okay, let's talk about your relationship with your husband. So you guys being partners in your first business, how do you complement each other? What skills do you both bring to the table, and how do you deal with each other's, let's say, flaws? If you guys have any flaws.
Oh, we do. We're all flawed. So as I mentioned, I'm the big idea person. I'm the visionary. I'm the one that I can see from A to Z, but he's the one that breaks down the steps, right? So he's very methodical. He's very, okay, have we thought about this, about that, about this, about that? So, and I'm marketing is my forte, public relations, sales, staff, like dealing with people is my forte. So basically, anything operational, it was where, I would excel at. And then he was more on the administrative, making sure that everything was on time, payments, payroll, all of the back of the house stuff was happening in the right way. We were so at the beginning there, we were both trying to get into our lanes. And it made for a lot of disagreements and a lot of like, well, you don't know what I'm doing. And no, you don't know what I'm doing. So very quickly, we realized that we needed to delineate our responsibilities and to be okay with each of us making our own decisions, considering we were going to make the decisions for the best of the business, right? So we were always going to have the best interest of the business at heart. And that worked. That delineation worked perfectly, so that we were able to have a good business relationship and then a good personal relationship as well. But it took a while. It took a while to get that.
How long ago was that?
15 years ago. Oh, my goodness.
15 years ago, and you have been married for?
20.
For 20 years. So you do have some experience being married and being in a business partnership with your partner, with your husband. So what piece of advice, if you could choose one or maybe two, what pieces of advice would you give to someone, either a woman or a man, who is planning on starting a business with their partner, with their love partner?
So I would say to first be very clear about what are the responsibilities of each person. Like crystal clear about what those activities are. And like almost like have almost like a partnership agreement, right? Like, this is what I'm doing, this is what you're doing, and if we have any disagreements, this is how we're going to solve them. The other thing is very important is no business talk on the dinner table whatsoever. And that's really hard. It's easier said than done, but it's really, really hard, right? Because when we're living and breathing our business, it's really hard to not talk about business at the dinner table. But when you have kids, it's also important to kind of have different topics of conversation, or to have other interests or have other activities, so that is not just a business relationship, right? So that ended up, and so because we were not doing business talk, we actually said, or designated a day of the week and it's every Monday. So every Monday not anymore, not as much anymore, but every Monday we used to have almost like a meeting, just a business meeting, my husband and I, and it was like everything. How are we doing on inventory, finances, marketing, HR? Like, we would go in it was like a huddle, like a business huddle. So that we knew that, every Monday we have an hour to an hour and a half to discuss business. And then everything else, we're at the dinner table, we just make a mental note and we talk about it on Monday. If it's something is crucial, then yeah, sure, you're going to talk about it before, but we just became very, very protective of our family time.
Oh,
Especially dinner. For me, dinner
that's
is very
key.
important.
Yeah, family time is key. So tell me, do you still have that pet store
I do. Yeah. So I have
in
two.
in Ottawa? Two in Ottawa.
Yeah.
Yeah. What is it called? Go ahead and let's do your promotional minute here. So where are the pet stores?
Yeah. So it's Global Pet Foods in the Canada area in Ottawa, and then Global Pet Foods in the Hintonburg area in Ottawa. So one is more suburbs, and then the other one is more kind of center town, in the Ottawa area.
So what I would also love to know is what the main challenge has been for you. Let's talk about the first pet store, or about both as one business, okay? So for the past 15 years, I'm sure you have encountered hundreds of challenges. Looking back now, what do you think was the main challenge you faced to grow the business, to start it, or to keep it alive in hard times?
It's really interesting because 15 years ago, the pet industry was a very male-dominated industry. So my challenges have changed over time, right? As I've grown with the business.
Yeah, go ahead. You can mention 2 or 3 challenges if it's more than one.
I think the first one was, it was an extremely male-dominated business. It's changing now. So, and I was fairly young when I opened the business. I was in my 20s. So trying to be taken seriously by a very male-dominated industry as a younger woman, back then with more of an accent that I have now.
Yeah, and an immigrant, I was going to say, yeah.
And an immigrant, yeah. I remember once there was a client of mine that one of my first clients was very, very not nice, because I didn't have a specific product, but I said, the truck is just here. If you give me 10 minutes, I'll unload the truck and I'll give you your product, or the product that you're looking for. And they got so agitated and they said, "You effing immigrant, go back to your country." Because when I get nervous, my accent gets really thick, and then I start stumbling, and
the pitch gets higher.
Yeah, exactly. And they were like, "I want to talk to your manager," and I'm like, "Actually, I'm the owner, and I'm gonna ask you to leave the store." So being taken seriously as a younger woman with an accent was challenge number one. Challenge number two, trying to balance motherhood and entrepreneurship. Really hard, really, really hard. So my husband is a teacher. He's always been a teacher. So he was my business partner, but it's on a part-time basis, right? So whenever he's off teaching, then he's doing, the accounting and whatnot. So I was a full-time entrepreneur, but I was also a full-time mom. So trying to be doing everything with a kid hanging up, in like a baby Bjorn, and having the little, putting them to sleep in dog beds in the office, trying to manage kids that are sick and they can't go to school because they're sick, but I can't miss going to work. going to my business. So I would bring my sick kids to work. So there's a lot of mom guilt, especially as my kids were younger. So that was extremely challenging. And then as I started getting more mature in my business journey, as I mentioned, my husband was always the one doing the accounting and doing all of the numbers. And there was a point where I realized that if I want to be a good entrepreneur, like a whole, rounded or a well-rounded entrepreneur, I needed to learn that as well. So I opened a third business. And I told my husband, I only need your help for 3 months. And in those 3 months, I want to learn what you're doing at the store so that I'm able to do it all in this third business. And he did. And it was really challenging learning the cash flow, learning like how to manage your money, how to do accounts payables, accounts receivables, HST remittance, corporate taxes, all of that. It's another skill that I didn't have for the longest time. And that was a big challenge. And, but I ended up learning by making a lot of mistakes, but learned. And now I think it's how do I focus my attention, right? How do I not go crazy and open another business or another thing? How do I just buckle down and say, nope, this is how do I grow what I already have? How do I maximize it? How do I scale it so that it becomes a more mature business? So the challenges evolve.
I can relate to the accounting part. Did you learn accounting? Is that what you did during those 3 months? Did you feel that? Much. What was the difference for you personally after you learned that area?
Yeah. So first of all, so my husband studied accounting. So to him, that to him is almost second nature, right? And he ended up getting a little bit frustrated when I would ask him a lot of questions. So I think what made the difference to me was when I went to my accountant. And this is actually something that I recommend to a lot of my clients.
You recommend to them?
Yeah. So I recommend going to your accountant, which is what I did, and saying, Mr. Accountant or Miss Accountant, explain to me my balance sheet or my statement of cash flow line by line. Talk to me like I'm a grade 6 kid and explain to me what each line means and how does it relate to everything else. What does it mean? And how do I learn to read these reports? And how do I learn what do they mean? How do I tell the story from the numbers? So my accountant was extremely patient. He took 2 hours. I paid him, of course, but he took 2 hours to go line by line and explain what everything meant and how everything related and fed to everything. And he explained to me QuickBooks, this is how you get this report. This is what you need to be looking for in your report. And it made the world of difference. And I don't see numbers the same way anymore. Like now I'm able to see numbers and figure out, okay, there's something wrong here, or I should have done this, better. So to me, not giving all of the power to whoever does your accounting is key. Making sure that you take the time to learn and taking the time to learning the numbers in your industry. So based on, on data out there, what are some benchmark numbers that you can compare your business with other similar businesses? And that information is out there. So it's like finding that information and managing your business accounting based off of that, at least so that you can have a compass or a blueprint to follow. So it made a huge difference. But again, it wasn't immediate. It took a while. But now I feel, again, a more rounded entrepreneur because of it.
And more empowered,
exactly,
even more free.
And I'm not the one who does the accounting, by the way. No, like I don't do it. But when I get the reports from my accountant every month, I know what I know, like I open those reports and I know what I'm looking at and I know the questions to ask or what changes I need to make in my business to improve it. So, but it's like you said, it just feels so empowering.
I think that's a great idea. Great idea. Yeah, I'm probably gonna reach out to my accountant and book some private lessons.
Exactly. And a lot of the times we feel like, oh my God, I don't want to sound dumb, or I don't want to sound like, no, it's like, it's, that's what your accountants are there for.
Yeah. Uh, you also mentioned that you are all over the place and you want to open more businesses. Do you have 4 businesses right now?
So I ended up closing the third business, which was a restaurant. Was doing great. Then pandemic hit, and it made no sense to keep it alive and to keep putting money during the pandemic when we didn't know how, we had no indication of what was going on, right? So it was a business decision. So that one's not longer there, and I have business consulting that I've had for quite a while now, and I'm in the process of opening a non-for-profit based off the consulting business.
So you mentioned before that you like opening businesses and you have ideas for new businesses. What is the reward for having successful businesses, and what is the drive that moves you to go and want to open more businesses?
So what is the drive? It's again solving problems, seeing a problem, and then seeing that the solutions that are available, if there are solutions available, that they could be improved. So that's adrenaline rush number 1. Adrenaline rush number 2 is it's the rush of the start, right? Like the trying to bring all of the pieces together and figuring out how to solve the problem, and then where is it going to be? How are we going to do it? Is again problem solving and trying to figure out all of those puzzle pieces. To me, I get a rush. It's hard to describe. It's just like and seeing it come from nothing to something, right? Like from a crazy idea to actually something tangible that people get excited about. It's a huge rush, and it's funny because that's where I get the rush. The day-to-day mundane operations, that's where I get bored. That's where I'm like, oh my God, let's just hire somebody to do their day-to-day operations. And then when there is a problem or when there is a crisis, that's when I come alive. It's like, okay, a crisis, it's a problem. Let's solve that problem. So I'm good at crisis management. The day-to-day operations bores me.
Yeah.
And I always say that I'm diagnosed with ADHD. Like I have ADHD. Sometimes I medicate myself, sometimes I don't, but I definitely have ADHD in business. Like I'm always like, hyperactive, and like, I'm opening and closing businesses in my head, every day, all the time. But when I actually see a problem that is really a problem, and where I see how I'm able to find that solution, and it's a solution that people are, buying or people are recommending, it's just a rush like no other. But I understand that also too much of that can be a bad thing, right? Because then I don't put the attention where I need to put the attention, because it's hard to run so many businesses at the same time.
There's a second, well, we have a second business, but nobody knows about it. So there's a third business that my wife and we've been thinking about it for so long. And then the pandemic happened. So that didn't happen. But I've always had it in the back of my mind, it's something that can wait. It's not a solution that the world needs today. It's something that it could happen in 20 years. But I was talking about that with our friend Nick Narani, the founder of the Canadian Immigrant Magazine, who started the top 25 Canadian Immigrants Award, which he won a few years ago. So I was talking to him, and then he said, no, Elton. Biggest mistake that many people do is they have one business, it starts going well, it becomes a little bit successful, and then they go, okay, what's next? And they do something else, and then, okay, what's next? No, become the best in your business, and then once you have dominated the market, then go and do something else. I was thinking, I don't know if I have an entire life to wait for other opportunities.
I have a different tip.
Okay.
So my different tip would be, don't open that other business until you have systemized the existing business that you have, until you have created systems for absolutely everything, brought in the right people to execute those systems, so that it's a foolproof business, right? So that on your HR, create your HR system. On your marketing, create your marketing system. If you have, I don't know, inventory, your inventory system, so that it's replicable, right? Like it's all the stuff that you do over and over and over and over. So what is the system that you can create that then you can offload to somebody else? So I have a motto where I say, hire the best and get out of their way. So I usually, but systemize it, hire the best so that they're able to execute on that system, and then get out of their way. Because sometimes we are on the way of our own employees or even of ourselves. But for me, it's like systemize it, create the system, hire the right people so that they're able to, to continue with the business. And then once that business is stable and is growing, and and that doesn't mean like completely disappear from the business, but you don't have to be doing everything from the business. Just create the system and then give it away to the staff that you hire. So that's sort of what's worked for me. And right now with the stores, my involvement is minimum. My involvement is once a week, where I just have accountability meetings with the leadership team, where we take a look at numbers, we take a look at what's happening, and my job is just to facilitate whatever they need. Well, we need more budget for this, or we need to hire I don't know, a marketing person. So it's like facilitating that. But the day-to-day operations, the day-to-day inventory management, the day-to-day everything, the leadership team is the one that does it.
You just mentioned the key word. I just wrote it down: leadership, and exclamation mark. Let's talk about leadership. What does that mean for you in your personal life?
So for me, when you become a leader, success is when you're growing others, right? So it's about having the willingness and having the love and the passion to grow others, whether it is other entrepreneurs, your community, students, kids, anything. It's to be able to put out yourself out there, share your knowledge, share best practices, share your network, so that it benefits the next generation of fill in the blank of whatever it is. So for me, it's about growth. It's about help, reaching, sideways, back, in the back or in the front, and pulling people so that they're able to eventually, reach higher than you can. So that, to me, that's very personal, and it's something that I'm very passionate about.
And what would be a mistake that you made on this journey becoming a leader that you would highly advise aspiring or beginning entrepreneurs to avoid?
Ego.
Ego.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, what does that mean? I got none. So
ego can be when you're in a leadership position, ego can get the best of you sometimes.
Mm-hmm.
And it can hurt. It can hurt a lot.
Is it the desire to be right?
The desire to be right
in the spotlight?
In the spotlight, the desire to be known, the desire, again, like, is it the desire, financial desire? I don't know, ego. So, and that can definitely be something that can get in the way for, in any person. And I think it's becoming, or being a leader is, it's being humble enough to know what you are really good at, but also what you're not good at, and that perhaps you need to learn it from somebody else, or you need to bring somebody to fill in that gap that you have.
And now you got me curious. What are you currently working on that you think that maybe for your business, maybe for your personal life, you would still need to improve a little bit? Where are you at in your life, learning-wise?
That's a great question. So, impact. I guess, where do I need to learn more of is how can I use the information and the knowledge that I've acquired and the networks that I built, and how can I use that to create something that is going to transcend me as an individual, and that is going to have a bigger impact in like generations to come. So it's like a purposeful business or a purposeful life or a purposeful venture. How can I channel all that I've been able to learn and acquire, and how can I channel it into something that is going to transcend me, that if I die tomorrow, it's not going to disappear with me, that is going to keep going and is going to keep making a change.
It sounds like you're about to start writing a book, but let's not talk about it. How is that related to your next business, the nonprofit?
It's everything. It really is everything. So it's basically trying to figure out how. So when I started the consulting business, my idea was to provide a service that did not exist back in the day, six years ago, that did not exist for immigrant entrepreneurs. So people who were coming to Canada wanted to open a business, opening 1,000 web browsers to try to figure out how to do it in Canada, depending on which province it is. Everything is so different from province to province. And if English is not your first language, it's even harder. So I'm like, okay, so I'm going to be that person, ego. I'm going to be that person that is going to help them all. But it's impossible to help them all, right? It's if I'm just me, and the consulting business, my name, ego again. So it has my name. So it's like, if I die tomorrow, that business goes tomorrow. My name goes with the business, and I'm only going to be able to help the people that I've already helped, but it's not going to transcend. So then that's when I realized if I want to have a bigger impact, I need to remove myself. I need to remove my image. I need to remove my name from what I want to build so that I can have a bigger impact. And that's when in March last year, I incorporated the not-for-profit Immigrant Entrepreneur Canada, which again is in the baby stages, completely different terms, by the way, the not-for-profit sector, but it's so that we're able to access government funding so that we can create accelerators and incubators for immigrants that are coming into Canada so that they're able to either open, grow, or acquire businesses in Canada. So that's a big plan. And I foresee myself being in this organization for the next 5-10 years, but I want to be able to create this organization and bring in talent so that it can transcend me, so that it can keep growing and it can be a legacy project.
Okay, so break it down for me. Whom is this organization for? Is it for underrepresented entrepreneurs or for immigrant entrepreneurs?
Immigrants. Yeah. So my consulting business is underrepresented entrepreneurs.
Okay.
But I went back to my core. Where do I feel alive? Where do I feel like the gap is? Where do I feel that I would feel very connected with? And I kept going back to the immigrant population. I will always be an immigrant and very proud. And there's always going to be immigrants in Canada. And, but there is no immigrant entrepreneur organization in Canada, which kind of is crazy. So I decided to target this organization specifically for immigrant entrepreneurs.
That's a good idea. Yeah. So tell me, now going back to your business consultancy business, is it a business consultancy?
Yeah.
Or yeah,
it's a consulting business.
Your consulting business. So it says that on the website you serve underrepresented entrepreneurs. Who are underrepresented entrepreneurs?
I love talking about this subject. So I live in Ottawa. Ottawa, if you've ever been to Ottawa, it's a beautiful town. It's where most of the federal government is housed. And if you really look at the intersectionalities of the population in Canada, it's multicultural, but nothing compared to Vancouver, nothing compared to Toronto, nothing compared to Montreal. And when I started attending events, business events here in Ottawa, I realized that I was a true minority. Like, it was very white. Not that it's nothing wrong with it, but I realized that it doesn't, the business events in that environment doesn't really represent the true business environment in the city.
Yeah.
So I'm like, why is that? So then underrepresented entrepreneurs is basically all of the other types of entrepreneurs that exist in our cities that don't necessarily get represented in these big economic development events or in these big chamber of commerce organizations. So who are they? They're Indigenous entrepreneurs. They're Black entrepreneurs. They're female entrepreneurs. They're immigrant entrepreneurs. So all of the others that sometimes are missing in those panel discussions, in those stages, doing keynote speeches, or in the networking events, being attendees. So those are the people that I focus on, and mostly it's organizations that target those individuals. So I work with Adawe, which is an Indigenous entrepreneurship hub, where I help create some of their programming and their incubation programs, and I do business advisory services for Indigenous entrepreneurs. They're awesome, by the way. It's a really amazing community. Then I work with another organization, the Changemaker Hub. They do it's a Black entrepreneurship hub. It's a Black-centered entrepreneurship hub where, again, developing their incubation program, sometimes delivering it, doing business advisory. So all of the others that sometimes are missing from those panel discussions and those keynote speeches, I want them to be there.
And do you work directly with individuals or with organizations?
Both. So I can work with the organizations who want to create programming, but don't necessarily have the capacity to build those types of programs because they're not entrepreneurs or their staff is not entrepreneurial. So then they hire me to develop their programs, develop their incubators or accelerator programs, the workshops, trying to figure out how everything is going to work. Yep. And then a lot of the times they also need entrepreneurs in residence, business advisors, business coaches. So I can either just plan, develop the program, or I can plan, develop, and execute the program. So then I get to work directly with the entrepreneurs as well.
And I'm assuming all these people have many challenges as well, just like we all face a variety of challenges in our businesses. Is there any commonality? Are there any common challenges that everybody tends to face and that you are able to help them with?
Yeah, so some I'm able to help, some I'm not. A lot of one that is common across the intersectionalities is the feeling of the imposter syndrome. When all of them at one point they kind of doubt themselves that I'm way over my head. What am I even thinking about? Trying to do this? There's either intergenerational trauma or there's intergenerational poverty. All of these really deep issues that, with all of the intersectionalities that I'm working, it's very common that imposter syndrome. Some I'm able to help, some I'm not. It's probably for some others, it's going to take a little bit more work. A little bit more tangible challenges for all of them. And I think it's true for a lot of new entrepreneurs, regardless of where we come from. Access to funding. So funding is always going to be an issue. It's not necessarily loans, but access to grants. Grants are available for the non-for-profit sector. Business grants, they're limited and they're usually quite small, and it's usually a contest or in a contest basis. So if you're an underrepresented entrepreneur who has lived intergenerationally in poverty, or there's intergenerational trauma, all of these very, very deep issues, accessing to funding is going to be key. Especially accessing to non-repayable funding is going to be key for the success of the business, and that funding is very limited. So that's a big one, a big, big, big one. So then we try to figure out what other ways we can do it.
Yeah, I can imagine. What piece of advice would you give to someone who is new to Canada, a newcomer, let's say someone in their first 5 years here, and who has great ideas to start a business? 1, 2, 3 pieces of advice.
Yes. Number one, Google Small Business Enterprise Center, and then the name of the city where you live. So SBEC, so Small Business Enterprise Center. Canada, it has publicly funded business centers in every major city and even smaller cities. Every city, almost every city in Canada has a publicly funded small business enterprise center, which means that it's a center where you can go and you can access business advisory services for free. You can access workshops about business for free. You're paying for it with your taxes, so you might as well take advantage of it because they're publicly funded because taxpayers pay for them. And they're available for everybody and anybody at any stage of their business, whether you just have an idea or you want to sell an existing business. Anybody who lives in Canada can access those services. So that would be my main one. And it's also a really cool place where you can meet other people. Sometimes they have events and networking. So it's a good way for people to start, getting their feet wet in the local ecosystem. So that would be one. Number two would be to just take a look at, because we may come from different countries with different ways of doing business. And the number two would be just Google business model canvas. If you have an idea, just Google business model canvas and then, try to follow it, try to do it. It's a very simple way of kind of putting your ideas into one piece of paper and know what you need to do next. So I think those would be my two one if you're just thinking about an idea.
And now give me 1 or 2 mistakes that any newcomer should avoid if they want to become entrepreneurs in Canada.
Yes. So one mistake that newcomers could avoid if you're starting a business in Canada is never mix business with pleasure. And what I mean about that is when you are starting a business, you're probably going to be selling something, either a service or a product. And it's very easy when you are just starting to deposit all of that into your personal bank account. So my recommendation is as soon as you think that you're going to open a business, first of all, register it. You can register it as a sole proprietorship, super easy, very inexpensive. And then after you register it, open a business bank account. Again, super easy and inexpensive. Or if you're doing a sole proprietorship, just dedicate one bank account only for your business. Separate business with pleasure from the beginning. Trust me, your taxes, everything is going to be so much easier. And number two, make sure that you incorporate some sort of accounting, whether it is an Excel sheet. I mean, that's like the bare minimum, but an Excel sheet or something like Wave accounting, WAVE. It's a free accounting. You can actually connect your bank account to the accounting software and your credit card for the business. Remember, never mix business with pleasure. And then anytime you make a transaction or you get a sale, it's going to be recorded automatically. So then, things don't fall through the cracks. So register your business, don't mix business with pleasure, and incorporate some sort of accounting so that you don't have a headache come the end of the year.
Great. Great tips. Now, Canada. Is Canada a good place to start a business in 2024?
It is. Absolutely. It definitely is. It's not easy. Canada's a very strict country when it comes to permits, licenses, requirements, and all of that. But it's strict for a reason. And if you follow those rules and you do your homework and you do your planning, it's definitely a good country to start a business. Absolutely. Or to grow a business. Absolutely. There's more and more programs available and resources and support available for either aspiring or existing entrepreneurs that you're not going to be doing it alone.
So it is a good place to start a business. Great. Let's start another business in 2024. Everybody who is listening to this, I'd like to know if you have had any role models online, influencers, people like Tony Robbins or Mel Robbins. I like, for example, Ed Milet a lot. There's another podcast called Impact Theory, Lewis Howes. So I do follow a lot of people that, even though I don't have so many let's call them successful entrepreneurs in my personal life physically, I am always listening to these guys who are big in their own areas, and it's all free online. Do you have anybody that you follow or that has inspired you as well?
Yeah. So Amy Porterfield, I'm not sure if you're familiar with her. She does a lot of online marketing and course creation and whatnot. She's just really smart. And again, she's a problem solver, right? And her podcasts are incredible. If you are struggling with digital marketing, she has some fantastic resources. And if you're ever into or trying to dab into creating online courses and whatnot, she's also has incredible resources for that. So yeah, so I admire her. I've been following her for years, and she's definitely somebody that I listen to. Again, like you say, it's free. The podcast is really good, and definitely pretty inspiring.
Is there any book or are there any books that you also recommend to anybody who's thinking of starting a business?
Thinking of starting a business. So any book by Mike Michalowicz. So he's the writer of the Pumpkin Project, what's it called? Here we go. Profit First. Actually, let me show you. This is an incredible. If you're struggling with numbers,
you have it right there.
Profit. Yeah, I have
Great.
one here. Profit First, an amazing book. If you're trying to figure out how to manage the finances of your business, if you're just starting, fantastic little book. It's super easy to read. I would say also the E-Myth Revisited. If you're just starting or growing, and doesn't matter what stage of the business you're in, E-Myth Revisited is awesome. And then another book that I actually heard it on audiobook the other day, Build to Sell, is an incredible book because it talks about how to build a business where it takes you out of the equation, creating a system so that then you're able to sell it. It's really easy to read or to listen to because it follows a fictional story, but it throws a lot of little golden nuggets everywhere. So it's a great little business book.
Oh, I love it. I haven't read any of those. I'm a little bit ashamed. I had a guest over the other day, and I was so happy. He was mentioning a few books, and I said, "Yeah, I have this one. Oh, I have this one. I read that one. Yeah." With you, I haven't read any of those three. Great.
Yeah, homework.
Yeah. One more. So tell me now, what is the Canadian dream for you, or have you achieved your Canadian dream?
Wow, I've never been asked that question. Yeah, have I achieved my Canadian dream? I think I have. See, to me, right now, my most precious currency is time. And having time to, go to my kids' competition, or having time to volunteer my kids' school without having to worry. And I'm at that point right now. I'm at the point where after 15 years, I now have the time to focus on the things that are most important to me at this point in time. So to me, that's my dream, right? I guess the next dream to complete would be, I don't know, to spend the winters in Mexico.
All right.
Avoid winters altogether. But I guess, yeah, and again, it's all about time, right? Like being able to have that precious currency to focus on what's important to me at any given moment.
And when you look back, it's been 20 some years since you came to Canada. Is that correct?
Correct.
How has that little girl, Karla, changed, evolved?
Wow. Well, that little girl started a business when she was 6.
6?
Yeah.
Were you selling paintings, drawings?
I was selling candy.
Oh, great.
And my parents told us that if we got straight A's for an entire year, they would bring us to Disneyland. But so we did, right? Because it's a challenge,
Yeah.
and we needed straight A's because if we got straight A's, then we would get a scholarship in the school, so my parents wouldn't have to pay for the tuition. They were smart. So
Win.
exactly. So then I ended up we all ended up getting straight A's. So they're like, okay, so now we need to deliver. And they're like, okay, we can take you to Disneyland. We can pay for the hotel and the food and the theme park, but we don't have money for your spending money. So you're going to have to figure it out. So I asked my parents for a loan of like, I don't know, $10. Went and bought candy and then resold it in my school. Started hiring by commission my classmates, and then the principal told my parents that I needed to stop because I was selling too much candy and taking too much business away from the cafeteria lady. So how has that girl changed from that? Not much. I always like a
Don't take
challenge.
no for an answer.
Don't take no for an answer. If any, it's just made me more passionate about business and more than anything about helping others achieve their own Canadian dreams as well.
Oh, I love it. And that's our cue to end this episode. Karla, it has been an immense pleasure talking to you. It's been about an hour. Thank you so much.
Thanks for having me.
So before I let you go, finally, tell me one thing. For anybody who is still fighting for their dreams, they're not so lucky, not as lucky as we are, and they still see some light at the end of the tunnel, or they don't even see that light. What would you like to say to all those people, immigrants or not, who are still fighting for their dreams?
Keep fighting and don't take no for an answer. And you don't have to do it alone. Sometimes where, I don't know if it's pride or I don't know, but sometimes we try to be very self-sufficient and do it on our own. And there's a time when we have to realize that there's a whole community out there that is willing to reach out and support. We just need to be willing to ask for that help and to reach out and grab somebody's hand. And I know, that there is people on LinkedIn, there is people on Facebook, there's people everywhere. There is a big community out there that is willing to help out if you ask for help. So to me, that was a big lesson initially, that I thought that I could do it all by myself. And I was too proud to ask for help. But when I said, you know what, if I don't ask, nobody's going to know that I need help. And I reached out and I was very, very, very surprised at the amount of people that were willing to step up and provide support. So I'd say, don't take no for an answer. Don't give up. But always, try to see who you can ask for help. Even people, people on the interwebs, complete strangers, you might be surprised at how much they're willing to help.
Thank you, Karla. It was a pleasure talking to you. I'll see you next time. And thank you for watching another episode of the Canadian Dream Podcast. I hope you liked our new background. We're here in our studio in Vancouver, British Columbia. And if you did enjoy this episode, remember to like it, to share it with anybody who would appreciate some content like this. Please remember to subscribe to our channel. We're getting close to 10,000 subscribers on YouTube. Yay! Thank you so much, and I'll see you on the next episode.